Hey, everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Mhm.
This time, well, you guys know how much I love cats, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So this one is really special. We're going to head all the way up to the Tibetan Plateau today um, in search of the super elusive, gotta say it, super elusive Chinese mountain cat. And actually, this one came from one of our listeners sent this in. So thank you for that. This is some fascinating stuff, gotta say.
It's a truly remarkable creature, so much we still don't know about it, even for researchers like myself.
Oh, I bet. So
Yeah.
before we get into all that, can we paint a picture for everyone? What does this cat, this elusive feline, what does it even look like?
Okay, so imagine a cat just perfectly adapted for a life in like the high mountains,
There you
right?
go.
Sandy or grayish-brown fur, so great camouflage against those rocks.
I bet, yeah.
A striking ringed tail, they have large rounded ears,
Oh, wow.
and a short muzzle
Okay.
really helps to minimize heat loss in those frigid temperatures.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know, the Tibetan Plateau gets pretty cold.
Yeah, of course.
And they're a bit bigger than your average house cat.
Okay.
You're looking at typically around 70 to 90 centimeters long
Okay.
and weighing in at 4.5 to 9 kilograms.
Okay, so not exactly a little lap cat.
Right.
No. And speaking of that environment, right,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit more about that, about this habitat? I mean, we know it's in China, but where exactly?
Okay, so picture this. Vast, windswept grasslands. You have alpine meadows with wildflowers.
Beautiful.
Hardy shrubs clinging to the slopes. We're talking elevations of 2,500 to 5,000 meters above sea level.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that's higher than most mountains in North America.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. And I was reading that the types of grasses and plants up there are they're super unique, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Tibetan Plateau has some incredibly resilient flora.
It has to survive up there.
It does. Take the Cobresia grasses, for example.
Obviously.
Cobresia, yeah.
Okay.
That's Kobresia. They're the dominant type of vegetation in the mountain cat's habitat.
Okay.
And these grasses have evolved to cope with freezing temperatures, the strong winds, even grazing from wild herbivores like yaks.
Wow.
So they're very hardy.
So hardy. Okay. So it sounds like a truly wild place, even for the toughest of creatures, I imagine. So how does the Chinese mountain cat, how does it not just survive, but thrive in this kind of environment?
Well, a big part of its success comes down to, its stealthy hunting techniques.
Okay.
The cat is like a master of camouflage,
Oh, yeah.
and it prefers to hunt under the cover of darkness
Okay.
when its prey is most active
Makes sense.
and when it's cooler.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a big part of it.
I bet that makes it even more difficult for researchers to study them.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about their diet? With such a limited, I mean, I imagine food must be pretty scarce.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But the Chinese mountain cat has really adapted to exploit the resources that are available.
Oh.
So its primary prey is pikas.
Pikas. I love pikas. So cute.
They are. Those adorable little rabbit-like creatures
Yeah.
and voles.
Okay.
But it's an opportunistic feeder.
Okay.
So birds, insects, even carrion, if it has to, it's on the menu,
Oh, wow.
whatever it can get.
Resourceful little guy.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So it sounds like this cat is, perfectly suited to this environment.
Right.
Yeah. But then you mentioned, the IUCN Red List.
Yes.
Can you explain, for people who might not know what that is, and why it matters for this cat?
Yeah, of course. The IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, they keep track of the conservation status of animals all around the world.
Okay.
And the Red List is essentially like a barometer
Okay.
of how a species is doing.
Okay.
And it ranges from, least concern all the way to critically endangered.
So where does the Chinese mountain cat fall on that?
Unfortunately, it's currently classified as vulnerable, which means it's facing a real risk of extinction in the wild.
Oh, wow.
And with a population, we estimate under 10,000 mature individuals.
Oh, wow.
It's definitely cause for concern.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into that. What are the biggest threats facing this creature?
Habitat loss, it's a major one.
Okay.
Overgrazing by livestock, goats and sheep, it's become a real problem.
Okay.
And this overgrazing depletes the vegetation
Okay.
that supports those pika and vole populations.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it creates this ripple effect,
Yeah.
directly impacting the mountain cat's food source.
It's heartbreaking to think that even in a place so remote, seemingly untouched as the Tibetan Plateau, that, like, human activity still has an impact.
It's a stark reminder
It is.
that even in those remote corners, it's not immune to the pressures that we're putting on the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just overgrazing. The use of rodenticides, which are poisons designed to control rodent populations, they're also having a devastating impact.
On the cat.
On the cats, yes.
Rodenticides. But aren't those, like, meant for, well, rodents? How's that affecting the cats?
Yeah, so it's both direct and indirect. Sadly, some cats are ingesting the poison directly. You know, they mistake it for food.
Oh, no.
But even more insidious is the impact on their prey. So when a pika or a vole eats the poison, those toxins accumulate in their systems. And then the cat, the mountain cat, eats those poisoned rodents. They ingest that poison, and it leads to secondary poisoning.
Wow, I hadn't considered that. It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. And there's actually another layer to it. Unlike some other feline species, the Chinese mountain cat, it seems to be particularly susceptible to certain types of rodenticides,
Cool.
specifically the ones that contain bromadiolone and difenacum.
So it's not just the presence of rodenticides, but like the specific types being used.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of understanding, the vulnerabilities of different species when we're implementing, pest control measures.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even those actions that seem unrelated to wildlife can still have those far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely. But before we get too discouraged, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay, I'm ready for some good news. What's being done? What's being done to protect this cat?
Well, there are some organizations doing some fantastic work. For example, there are initiatives focused on habitat restoration.
Okay.
So replanting native vegetation, establishing protected areas to create those safe havens for the cats and their prey.
Makes sense. If we can restore the habitat, they have a fighting chance, right?
Exactly. And there's also a lot of work being done to regulate the use of those rodenticides.
Okay.
So some are advocating for stricter regulations, on the types that are allowed.
Right.
While others are promoting those alternative methods for rodent control that are less harmful to the wildlife.
Okay. That's encouraging. But what about that conflict between cats and the herders?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, losing livestock to a predator,
Right.
even if it is endangered, I'm sure that causes tension.
Yeah, it definitely can. And that's where, education and community outreach are really important. A lot of herders, they just aren't aware of the cat or, how to coexist peacefully with it.
So it's about like bridging that knowledge gap and finding solutions that work for the cats and the people.
Exactly. Some organizations are working directly with those herders,
Wow.
teaching them about the cat's role in the ecosystem, providing them with, tools and techniques to prevent livestock loss.
Okay.
Things like predator-proof enclosures.
So it's kind of a multifaceted approach.
It is. It is.
Habitat restoration, rodenticide regulation, and then community education. So it sounds like there's, a real sense of collaboration, like a shared commitment to protect this species.
There is. There definitely is. And underlying all of that is the need for, more research.
Oh, sure.
The more we understand about the cat, its behavior, its ecology, the challenges it faces, the better we'll be able to develop, effective conservation strategies.
Yeah, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to conservation. So what are some of the questions that researchers are trying to answer?
Well, for one, we still don't know a lot about, the cat's social behavior.
Right.
Do they live in solitary like many other wild cats?
Right.
Or do they have, more complex social structures? Understanding their interactions could be crucial for developing those effective conservation plans.
Makes sense, yeah. What else? What else are they looking at?
Another area is their movement patterns.
Okay.
How far do they roam? How are they navigating that terrain?
Yeah.
By tracking their movements, researchers can identify those critical corridors and habitats that need protection.
It's fascinating to think that, like, even in this age, like, we still don't know that much about this creature.
It is. It really is. And that's what makes it so exciting. Every new piece of information brings us, one step closer to ensuring the survival of this remarkable cat.
For sure. So we've talked about the challenges, the threats, the efforts, but what surprised you the most out of all of this whole deep dive?
Honestly, it's their resilience. Like, imagine living in a landscape where temperatures just plummet, where the air is so thin, where food is scarce, and not just surviving, but thriving. It's a testament to the power of adaptation.
It's a reminder that even in the face of those impossible challenges, life finds a way.
It does. It really does. But this resilience, it has its limits.
Yeah.
And that's where, that why should we care question becomes so important.
Right, right. Why should we care about a cat that most of us are never going to see?
Well, for starters, the Chinese mountain cat is what we call a keystone species,
Okay.
meaning it plays a crucial role in, regulating the populations of those pikas and voles.
Right.
Without it, those populations could explode, leading to overgrazing, habitat degradation,
Okay.
and that whole cascade of negative impacts
Right.
on the ecosystem.
So protecting the Chinese mountain cat, it's about more than just saving one species. It's about, like, the balance.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that all living things are interconnected, and the loss of one species can have, far-reaching consequences.
Okay. So we've covered a lot. I know our listener has some great questions about, conservation. But for you, what's resonating with you the most?
For me, it's the reminder that even those small actions can make a difference.
Okay.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by, the scale of the environmental problems, but every choice we make, from the products we buy to the way we dispose of our waste,
Yeah.
it all has an impact.
So it's about, like, empowering ourselves to make those choices.
Exactly.
Recognizing that we all have a part to play in protecting this planet.
We do. And one of the most powerful things we can do is stay informed, to keep learning, and, to share that knowledge with others.
Awareness is key.
It really is.
Now, I know our listener had some really specific questions about, they were really curious about, like, what individual actions can make a difference. They asked, what can I do besides, donating to conservation organizations?
It's a great question because they're thinking beyond that. And honestly, even simple lifestyle choices can have like a ripple effect.
Okay.
Reducing our meat consumption, for example,
Yeah.
lessens the demand for grazing land, which helps protect the habitat.
So our food choices have an impact on a cat, like halfway around the world.
It's all connected.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. What else?
Being conscious consumers, supporting companies that prioritize sustainability, ethical sourcing, sends that message.
Yeah.
And advocating for change in our communities.
Okay.
Whether as, supporting local conservation initiatives or pushing for responsible pesticide use,
Yeah.
those can make a real difference.
So it sounds like being an informed, engaged citizen is just as important as any, financial donation.
Absolutely. And let's not underestimate the power of just sharing what we've learned. Talking to friends and family about the Chinese mountain cat, its challenges, it raises awareness, it sparks conversations.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness, right?
It does.
We're all part of this web, and our choices matter.
They do. And I think our listener also touched on a really interesting point. What does protecting a species actually mean? Is it about creating barriers between humans and wildlife, or finding ways to coexist?
That's a great question. And it kind of makes me think about the traditional, conservation model, setting aside protected areas,
Right.
which is crucial.
Absolutely.
But maybe true conservation requires like a more holistic approach.
I think you're right. Perhaps it's about shifting our perspective, viewing ourselves not as separate from nature, but as a part of it.
Yeah.
Finding ways to share this planet, recognizing our well-being is linked to the well-being of, all living things.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. It's not us versus them. We're all in this together.
Exactly.
And I think that brings us to one of their final points.
Yeah.
What unanswered questions, like what are you curious about when it comes to this cat?
For me, I keep coming back to that idea of adaptation.
Yeah.
How has this creature evolved to thrive in such a harsh environment? What are the adaptations that allow it to survive?
Yeah. Unraveling those mysteries could teach us so much.
It could. And for me, it's those social interactions. We know so little about how they communicate, establish their territories, raise their young.
It's like we've only just scratched the surface.
We have.
There's a whole world to discover up there.
There is.
Well, I think we've reached the summit of our deep dive into the Chinese mountain cat.
It has been a journey.
We've explored its habitat, diet, the threats, those amazing efforts. But this is really just the beginning. Keep exploring, ask questions, stay curious. Use what you've learned today to become a champion for conservation.
Remember, every action counts, no matter how small. Together, we can help ensure a brighter future for this amazing cat and the wonders of our natural world.
Until next time, keep exploring.